The mountains along the Thai-Laotian border are breathtaking, a rolling sea of green, shrouded in morning mist. But beauty can be deceptive. In the winter of 1987, these ridges became the front line of a war that would pit neighbor against neighbor, soldier against soldier. It was a war that most of the world never noticed. No global headlines, no dramatic speeches at the United Nations. Yet, for the people who lived here, it was impossible to ignore. This was not a war for oil, gold, or vast territories. It was a war for a few rugged hills, a handful of villages, and a line on a map drawn 80 years earlier by colonial powers who had never set foot in these valleys. For generations, the people of these hills had crossed the border freely to trade, to visit family, to share in festivals. But when history, politics, and pride collided, the border became a fault line, and the ground shook. Ban Ram Clow, a small, remote village, would become the spark. To outsiders, it was just another dot on the map. To Thailand and Laos, it was a symbol. Imagine two families arguing over where their fence should be. Now replace the fence with a mountain ridge and the polite conversation with artillery fire and fighter jets. That was Ban Ram Clow in December 1987. The village sat in a disputed zone, claimed by both sides. Its fields were fertile, its forests rich in timber, and its location strategic, perched near a ridge that commanded views for miles. Whoever held Ban Ram Clow could watch and control the movements of the other. The roots of this conflict stretched back to 1907, when the Franco-Siamese Treaty attempted to define the border between French Indochina and the Kingdom of Siam. The treaty relied on the natural watershed principle, the idea that the border would follow the highest points dividing river systems. But the maps drawn in Paris were flawed. Surveyors misread the terrain, rivers split into multiple tributaries, and the line on the map became a matter of interpretation. Where one side saw a border, the other saw a mistake. Over the decades, the ambiguity festered. Local disputes were patched over, but never resolved. And when the Cold War swept through Southeast Asia, the old disagreement took on new meaning. By the 1980s, the Thai-Laotian border was more than a local quarrel. Laos, aligned with Vietnam and the Soviet bloc, saw Thailand as a forward base for Western influence. Thailand, backed by the United States and its allies, viewed Laos as a potential staging ground for communist expansion. The disputed hills became pawns in a much larger game, a Cold War chessboard where every move was watched and every concession could be seen as weakness. For the villagers, the politics of Moscow, Washington, and Hanoi felt distant. But the soldiers patrolling their hills, the checkpoints on their roads, and the tension in the air were impossible to ignore. By the mid-1980s, the Thai-Laotian border was a place of uneasy stillness. The jungle canopy swayed gently in the wind, but beneath it, soldiers from both nations moved like shadows. Patrols passed each other on narrow trails, eyes locked, hands resting on rifle grips. In 1984, the first sparks of violence flared. A dispute over logging rights in the disputed zone led to a brief exchange of fire. It was over in hours, but it left a scar, a reminder that the peace here was fragile, and that the line between neighbor and enemy could vanish in a heartbeat. Over the next 3 years, both sides quietly prepared for the day the quiet would end. Thailand reinforced its border outposts, building new bunkers and cutting supply trails through the dense forest. Laos did the same, fortifying hilltops and digging trenches into the red earth. Villagers in the disputed areas learned to live with the tension. They passed through checkpoints on their way to market, their baskets of rice and vegetables inspected by young soldiers barely out of their teens. Children played within earshot of men cleaning rifles. The air was thick with the knowledge that one wrong move could set the hills ablaze.
On December 15, 1987, the spark came. Thai forces moved into Bon Rom Clau, a small village in the disputed zone, and raised the Thai flag over its rooftops. To Bangkok, it was a simple assertion of sovereignty. To Vientiane, it was a provocation that could not go unanswered. That night, the jungle came alive. Laos troops advanced under the cover of darkness, their boots sinking into the damp soil, their breath clouding in the cold mountain air. At 2 a.m., the first shots rang out, sharp cracks that echoed off the hills. Within minutes, the firefight spread. Tracer rounds streaked through the night like red comets. Mortar shells thudded into the earth, sending plumes of dirt and smoke into the air. By dawn, the Thai flag was gone. In its place, the red, blue, and white of Laos fluttered in the wind. The disputed hills had become a battlefield.
The fighting escalated with breathtaking speed. Thai artillery batteries opened up from positions deep inside their own territory, their shells whistling over the treetops before slamming into Lao positions. In response, Lao gunners returned fire, their rounds tearing through the jungle canopy. Thai F-5 fighter jets screamed overhead, their engines rattling windows and villages miles away. They dropped bombs on suspected Lao strongholds, the explosions sending shockwaves through the valleys. The jungle, once alive with the calls of birds and insects, now roared with the sound of war. Hill 1428 became the center of the storm. Thailand controlled most of its slopes, but Laos held the summit. And in mountain warfare, the high ground is everything. Day after day, soldiers fought for yards of territory. The slopes were steep, the ground slick with mud, and every advance was met with fierce resistance. The jungle floor became a maze of foxholes, sandbag walls, and camouflaged bunkers. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the scent of wet earth. For the men on both sides, the hill was no longer just a piece of land. It was a test of endurance, courage, and will.
For the soldiers, the war was not about treaties or maps. It was about surviving the next hour. Nights in the hills were cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. Rain turned the ground into a sucking mire that swallowed boots whole. Leeches clung to skin, and every rustle in the undergrowth could be an enemy patrol. Meals were eaten in silence, often from dented tin cans, under the dim light of a covered torch. Letters from home were read and reread until the paper grew soft from handling. Some wrote back, their words a mix of longing and reassurance. "I'm fine, don't worry, I'll be home soon." But home felt far away. Here in the hills, the war was everything. Friendships were forged in the mud and the smoke, bonds that would outlast the conflict itself. And yet, every day, those bonds were tested by the reality that not everyone would make it back.
By February 1988, the cost of the war was clear. Thailand had lost 147 men, with hundreds more wounded. Laos never released its casualty figures, but the losses were believed to be heavy.
In the final days of fighting, 2 Thai aircraft were shot down. The wreckage lay twisted in the jungle, a grim monument to the price of holding a line on a map. For the families of the fallen, the war was not a distant political dispute. It was a hole in their lives that could never be filled. Villages near the front bore their own scars. Fields lay untended, homes abandoned, and the sound of gunfire still echoed in the memories of those who had lived through it.
On February 19, 1988, the guns fell silent. A ceasefire was declared, and the soldiers began to withdraw from their forward positions. The border returned to its previous state. No territory changed hands, but both sides claimed victory. For the men who had fought, the end came not with celebration, but with a quiet order to stand down. They packed their gear, dismantled their bunkers, and began the long walk back down the hills. The war was over, but the memories would remain, etched into the minds of those who had lived through the thunder of artillery and the long, tense nights in the jungle.
The Thai-Laotian Border War slipped quickly from the headlines. For the world, it was a footnote in the final years of the Cold War. For those who had fought, it was a chapter they would never forget. In Ban Rom Clau, life slowly returned to normal. Children played in the fields again. Farmers returned to their paddies. But the hills remembered. Beneath the soil, rusting shell casings and fragments of shrapnel lay buried, silent witnesses to a war that had burned hot and then vanished into history. Time softened the scars, but it could not erase them. The war became a story told by elders, a cautionary tale about how quickly peace can unravel.
Decades have passed since the last shot was fired in the hills of Ban Rom Clau. The jungle has reclaimed the trenches, wrapping its green fingers around rusting barbed wire and collapsing bunkers. The foxholes are now filled with rainwater and leaves, their purpose forgotten by all but the oldest villagers. Yet, if you walk these ridges with someone who remembers, the past comes alive. They will point to a clearing and tell you where the artillery once stood. They will gesture toward a slope and recall the night it was lit by tracer fire. And they will speak of friends who never came home. The war left no grand monuments, no marble statues. Its memorials are quieter, a weathered photograph in a family home, a name etched into a wooden shrine, a story told in hushed tones over rice and tea. For the younger generation, the conflict is a history lesson, a chapter in a school book. For those who lived it, it is a memory that still walks beside them.
The Thai-Laotian Border War was small by the standards of the 20th century, a brief clash in a remote corner of Southeast Asia. But its lessons are not small. It showed how history's unfinished business, a line on a map drawn by distant powers, can ignite decades later. It revealed how local disputes can be magnified by global rivalries, turning neighbors into enemies. And it reminded us that even in wars without victors, there are always those who pay the price. Today, Thailand and Laos share trade, tourism, and cultural ties. The open is open, and the hills are quiet. But the peace is not an accident. It is the result of diplomacy, patience, and the will to move forward without forgetting the past. In the end, the ridges and valleys of Ban Rom Clau stand as both a warning and a hope that the scars of conflict can heal, and that the smallest places can teach the largest truths.